Hello there and welcome to my channel. I'm so excited to have you here. If you are new to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I am always putting out free content like this. You are going to love this video. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Christina Tarantola. I'm a former pharmacist, author, and transformation coach. And I help visionary women to release subconscious programming holding them back so that they can accelerate into their next level of income and impact. So let's dive right into the content. Today we're going to be talking about how to break the vicious cycle of pain. Now, so many of us deal with self-sabotage, and sometimes this shows up in various different ways physically in our environment. So for example, maybe you're constantly going on diets and you're gaining weight and losing weight and you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling stuck, you're beating yourself up. That's a way that a vicious cycle of pain can show up in your physical environment. Another way that it might show up is in your relationships, where you're finding yourself constantly attracting the same type of person that, if you really look at that person's characteristics, they are mimicking a situation from childhood. So maybe it's, your relationship with your father is mirroring something back around unavailability, and you're attracting people who can't really give you what you're looking for, or they're living, 5 hours away, whatever that is, they're unavailable in some way. Trust me, I get it. I've personally been through several of these different vicious cycles in my life. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And I want to help you today by understanding really at a core level what's happening and how to break that cycle. So the first thing to realize is that all of us walk around with different levels of pain, core wounding, traumas, whatever that might be. And so it's so subconscious that we don't even know what's operating until we become aware. And that's really what I want to highlight in this diagram here of how core wounds actually get formed and how they create this vicious cycle. So we all come onto the planet from pure love. We have a pure slate, and that's really our core essence of our soul, of who we really are, our mission and our purpose and what we're meant to be doing in the world. And as we grow up, we have all of these different messages. From 0 to 7, we are completely subconscious. So we absorb everything from our environment. So say, for example, that you were constantly told, if you expressed yourself a certain way, or you were upset and you cried, and your parents told you it's not okay to express yourself, it's not okay to cry. That's when this core wound is formed. And you might have made that mean as a 5-year-old child, I'm bad. So you're carrying around that shame, and that's a structural foundational piece of your blueprint. And now as an adult, it shows up as this shame cycle in, for example, it could show up in your weight. So you feel like you're depriving yourself and then you're binging. And that's how it showed up in my life, because I essentially had so much shame around who I was. I didn't feel like I could be myself. So we form these wounds and we form defenses around it. So if you see here, there's the core wound, the core, the wound, and then the defense around it. So we learn subconsciously how to form these defenses so that we can survive, because as children, we don't know how to deal with these different wounds and these feelings because we're not equipped with the tools yet. So a defense might be that, the child starts acting out, or maybe they get really angry and they become rageful, or they break down and they start crying. There's some type of defense that the child builds up around themselves so that they can feel safe and protected. And that's usually what the subconscious does. The subconscious is there to protect you. So as you grow up and as you go forward in life, you carry these wounds in your subconscious, in your energetic body, and it's constantly attracting those experiences that are similar so that you can be shown in your external environment, hey, we need to heal something inside. So most people don't look at things that way, right? We think that life is just happening and it's just happenstance and different coincidences are occurring for us. But what I want you to really dive into and to really embrace in this conversation is that your external reality is a mirror for what's going on inside of you. So I'll give you my example. I was constantly attracting unavailable men, and I was afraid to really let someone in because it wasn't familiar to me. And what was familiar was from my childhood being abandoned or being told that I was a bad person, or that was what my child mind made up. So whenever I was in relationship with a man who represented subconsciously my father, I felt safe whenever I was attracting a man that, wasn't getting very close to me. So that person could have lived 5 hours away. That person maybe was physically around, but like mentally checked out. So it's all these different ways that it can show up. And so you're attracting these experiences in your external environment to actually be invited to heal within some of these core wounds. So now I want to describe to you what a vicious cycle actually looks like and what are the different phases of the vicious cycle. So usually what happens is some external energy comes in and hits our defense. So that could be maybe a spouse says something that's triggering to you and it passes through the defense and gets to the core wound. And that's when we have that emotional reaction. So maybe you get pissed off or you get angry, you move the energy outward. And by that, I mean you blame the other person for your emotional reaction, or you become judgmental, and that's really you putting your energy focusing outward. Now, the other way that this can manifest is you put the energy back on yourself and you feel guilty or you feel ashamed, or you just feel like you're beating yourself up, and that internal critic comes out because you're like, oh, I had this emotional reaction and now I'm going to beat myself up. So usually people have one of two ways that this can manifest. So either you kind of lash out externally towards other people, or you can fold it in on yourself and kind of have that inner critic become really loud. So oftentimes what happens is your hard pain gets triggered. So I'm going to differentiate hard pain and soft pain. So soft pain is the wound itself. So whatever that is for you, maybe it's, I'm not enough, or I'm a bad person, whatever that core wound, whatever that messaging was, that is the soft pain. The hard pain is the shell of self-rejection and self-judgment that you put around the soft pain. So it's like you have that belief structure, and then on top of that you judge yourself for having that belief structure. So that person, whatever that trigger is, or that idea or that thought coming from the inside, triggers that hard pain, and that's really where we find our defenses flaring up, and that emotional reaction can get even more heightened. So there's usually some level of powerlessness or feeling like a victim, like, oh, this always happens to me, why can I never do this right? And that layering of judgment gets covered on top of that wound. So you're literally putting more energy consciousness on top of the wound instead of looking inward and really helping yourself to self-soothe and to release. So that is the last level of this vicious cycle, is adding that extra layer of energy consciousness by resisting and looking outward and not really looking within to self-soothe and to be curious about what that trigger really was about. So you might be saying to yourself, like, this always happens to me. Why can't I break this pattern? It's a lot of that internal dialogue of really beating yourself up. And I want you to realize that you can absolutely break this cycle. And that's what this next part is about. So really this vicious cycle, now that we've gone through the different phases of it, you can really see that it is about unresolved childhood consciousness that is running your current reality. So something that's triggering you from the outside is causing you to actually add more energy consciousness on top of this already hard pain and the wound right here. So what we want to help you do is to break this cycle and actually look within for self-soothing, because really what these external circumstances are calling you into is to heal within. So what it looks like to actually break this cycle of pain, you would, in that situation, instead of feeling triggered and then lashing out, you would actually go within and self-soothe. So whatever that is for you, if it's havening techniques, if it's just kind of holding yourself, if it's talking to your inner child, whatever that is, allowing your nervous system to just be calmed down, because that's what's happening. We get triggered, we get into that emotional state, and we become flooded. They actually call it flooding, because we're not thinking clearly. We're in that fight or flight response. So allowing yourself, and maybe if you are in conflict with someone, if it's a relationship, being able to just kind of step away to calm yourself down, to do some self-soothing, and allow yourself the space to really look at and become aware of what it was that triggered you. Because that first step of awareness is going to be how you break the cycle. So instead of spiraling out, we're actually spiraling in, and we're looking within to really become curious and aware of why we're reacting the way that we are. And usually it's because of some past experience. Sometimes it's totally subconscious. We might not know. And that's really where hypnosis can come in, and using a lot of that subconscious work. But consciously, you might be aware of like, oh, I know that that really triggered me because that was something that my father said to me 30 years ago or whatever. It reminded you of a certain experience. That's typically why we get triggered, because it reminds us of a familiar experience that was extremely painful. So this last key component is super important. You have the superego, which is actually your inner authority from your parents' fear. So you've actually taken that on, and it's subconsciously always in the background. So maybe it comes up whenever a new opportunity arises and your superego says, oh, you can never do that. Who do you think you are? That's the inner critic. So instead of listening to that voice, because that's trying to protect you, right? Subconscious is always trying to protect you. I want you to think from the highest perspective, and maybe even from a God perspective. What would God say in this situation? What would be the positive, healthy outlook or perspective for this situation? And come from that place. Because whenever you're getting triggered, everything is set into motion, and it all happens so quickly. You get flooded with all of these chemicals, and your fight or flight response kicks in, and it's very easy to attack and blame other people. But instead, with this breaking the cycle pattern that I'm showing you, that I'm explaining, it's really about spiraling within and being able to release some of that energy. So maybe you look within and you realize, wow, I am extremely in pain because as a kid, I was just I felt like I didn't belong. And so maybe you cry, or you have to move that energy out of your body in some way. That's releasing part of the wound. Doing any type of healing work, like I mentioned, hypnosis, timeline therapy, self-soothing, all of these techniques are really meant to help you to release this core wound. And what happens as a result is that you get this creative energy that your soul is meant to be expressing out into the world. So as you peel back the layers of the wound, you see just how beautiful your core essence is, and you start to listen to all the voices of, what am I supposed to be doing in the world? I really love writing, or whatever that is. The superego gets quieter, and that soul voice gets really ramped up, so you can start to follow that path. So there are so many beautiful outcomes from breaking the vicious cycle. And trust me, I have been in the worst case scenarios with vicious cycles and abuse and all of these different scenarios that were extremely painful. And I've done this work and come out of it, starting my business, growing it to multi-six figures, doing my life's calling, helping other women to release some of this pain as well, and having a healthy partner, healing my eating disorder. I mean, there's been so many amazing miracles that have occurred in my life, and it's all starts with this transformation work. So I would love to help you with this. If you are really looking for support, please feel free to reach out to me, subscribe to my channel. I would love to have a conversation with you and see how I can help.